Hello, and welcome to the Viking Home Companion with another story from the good old days. Now, this particular story is not necessarily meant to be amusing. This particular story is in response to some criticism that I received in an earlier video when I voiced some very strong opinions in regards to not liking a particular type of combat tactic that gets, in my opinion, overused in the SCA. I'm not going to make any apologies, so if you're watching this to expect an apology, you're not going to get it. Because, in my particular opinion, that tactic is only useful under certain circumstances and should not be used as the default tactic in virtually every single battle of every single war, regardless of the scenario or the type of battle that you're supposed to be fighting. And that tactic is known as pike dueling. For those of you who do not know what I am referring to, well, first of all, pike. Some kingdoms in the SCA refer to 9-foot-long spears as pikes. Other kingdoms, they just call them spears. And pike dueling is the tactic of moving your forces up to where they just get within range of those pikes or spears, and then you stand there and you let the pikes pick apart your front rank. There are very, very few circumstances where I believe that that is a sound tactic, and that is not based on the scenario, right? When I'm saying scenarios, those not familiar with SCA wars, we often have specific scenarios throughout the day that we fight. We'll have an open field battle, we'll have a bridge battle, we'll have a castle battle, we'll have a forest battle, and so on. And so this tactic, to many people, would seem to be, most useful in, say, a bridge battle, but again, no. It depends on the objective that your forces are given. And if your objective wasn't to defend a post, then there is virtually no circumstance that I believe that pike dueling is a viable tactic. And here's why. I'm going to go into teaching mode here for a moment, and then I'm going to give you a story that graphically demonstrates what I'm talking about. SCA combat comes in 3 ranges when you're talking about war: short, medium, and long. And that doesn't involve missile weapons, all right? Missile weapons can be considered long to extreme, but this is all about the melee weapons. You have short range. That is somebody using a single-handed weapon. You have medium range. That is someone using a great weapon. Great weapons have a limit in the SCA of 7.5 feet in length. Most SCA great weapons are between 6 and 7.5. Then you have long range, which are the pikes or spears. And those are typically 9 feet long. There are some places where people are allowed to use 12-foot long spears, and that just happened back when they started using fiberglass shafts so that they were stiff enough that they didn't dip really badly. When we were using rattan pikes, it was much more difficult to control something that was over 9 feet long. It got very wobbly. But most actual wars put a limit on total length of spears and pikes, and the average is typically 9, right? So why would any sane commander ever deliberately throw away 2/3 of their offensive firepower? Because when you're pike dueling, that is exactly what you have done. It is the #1 complaint of shield men throughout, that they are there to be nothing more than cannon fodder to pad somebody else's body count. So, what I'm going to talk about now is the use of these ranges in full engagement. It's not as self-explanatory necessarily as it sounds, because each range has a slightly different focus when you are at full engagement. And I am not talking about a charge. I'll get to that in a little bit here, but I'm not talking about a charge. I'm talking up to moving up with deliberation to reach full engagement with the enemy. And that is with the 2 lines of shields within range to be able to fight each other. Now, the shieldman's primary job is, yes, to be more on a defensive nature to maintain the integrity of the line and the unit, but they are not supposed to be discouraged from doing anything else. Now, often I advise shieldmen that are going to be spending most of their time in the line to be armed with a hand axe. If you're going to not go with a hand axe, go with a short weapon as opposed to a long one. The biggest issue with a longer one, like a regular broadsword that's close to 28 to 36 inches in length, is that in a tight situation, line on line, your weapon can get tangled up and make it hard for you to do anything with it. Short weapons are easier to strike and thrust with in a very tight formation or a tight engagement. I recommend the hand axe because I often refer to it as the Swiss Army knife of warfare, because you can hit people with it like any other weapon. Most of them are armed with thrusting tips, so you can still thrust with it, but it has one thing that no other weapon has. It has a hook. And so you can hook onto an opponent's shield and pull it down to expose him. You can hook opponent pole arms and spears, pikes as they're going over and yank them down so that they can't attack people. You would not believe how often I have had people cursing and swearing at me at the top of their lungs in a battle because I have hooked their pole arm or their spear and pulled it down and won't let go of it. I'm not required to let go of it. If I can hang on to it, I'm going to hang on to it. They can't hit anybody as long as I've got a hold of it. So you've moved up to full engagement. Your short range are now able to do something. The medium range weapons, you've got your great weapons. You've got your halberds, your pole axes, your great axes, your glaives. And they've got the range to not only be able to attack the shieldmen in front of your shieldmen, they can occasionally hit someone in the second rank of your opponent. Okay? Now, the pikes. Believe it or not, the pike's primary responsibility should not be attacking the first rank of the enemy side. I see so many pikemen do this. They get hyper-focused on just taking out the shieldmen. Why? Because they're used to pike dueling. And what do you target in pike dueling? The shieldmen, because that's the only thing in range, right? No. Your pikemen should only be taking the obvious freebie shot on the guys in the front rank. The front rank guys should be engaged by your front rank and by your great weapons, not by the pikes. The pike's primary job in a full engagement scenario is to be attacking past that front rank and taking on the pole arms. Especially, of course, the great weapons, who should be right up against that first rank, attacking your first rank. So those spearmen should be engaging past that front rank and attacking the great weapons in the second rank, and any of the opposing spears that have gotten extra brave and have moved up into the second rank instead of staying back a little bit. So that is what full engagement means. That means all 3 of your ranges engaging all at the same time, each with their own job to do. So, I am now going to give you a graphic example of this full engagement philosophy. And again, this isn't meant to be amusing, although some people will find it that way, especially my old buddies from the West Kingdom. There are going to be people from Caid, Aidenveld, Outlands, and Callantyre who are not going to be happy at all about this story and are probably going to try and chew me out and criticize me or say that they were there and that's not what happened. Well, I've got plenty of witnesses on my side who can say, Yes, it is. That is exactly what happened. So, the history of this battle is, it took place at the First Estrella War. Now, history here is that originally there was a war down in Southern California, Arizona, known as the Burro Creek Wars. And they were called that because it took place at a place called Burro Creek. Eventually, the SCA could no longer use that site, and we had the first of two wars that were known as Great Desert War 1 and 2. The first one, somewhat infamous now, and it is referred to as Cat Box 1. I am not going to go into that. That's for another story. But then they moved it to the site known as Estrella. And Estrella was actually a fairly nice site. It had a lot of chaparral scrub, so made good forest battle areas, even though there weren't trees. The chaparral and the shrub was tall enough to obscure vision, and you could move around the trails. There were dry creek washes and beds that we could run around in and play. So it was actually a pretty nice site. So this particular war, the West Kingdom was there. Because of what happened at Cat Box 1, the West had not had an official presence at the Second Great Desert War. And Estrella was the first time in 3 years, basically, that the West went down officially as a force and an ally, and we were allied with Pike. The King of the West didn't make it down, so command of the Western Army was given to Shionic, who was Prince of the Mists at the time. And the West had a pretty good showing. We had a fairly decent-sized amount of troops there. The two primary units were Griffin's Guard and the Vinhold War Junkies. And then there were some others there as well, but those were the two primary units that were there. I think we had probably around 30 or so people in the Western Army. And because of the numbers, Adenvelt was by far the largest army there individually, and Kai pretty much got all of the allies to even up the sides. So the West, Calmetier, Outlands, and a few others were all part of the Kaidan side. And this battle takes place during the bridge battles. Now, there were two bridges. The bridges were approximately 30 feet wide and about 100 or so feet long. They were big bridges. And the bridges were actually really far apart. There was a very significant distance between the two bridges. Now, Adenvelt defended, of course, both sides of the bridges on the one side, and Kaid was down on the far right bridge from my perspective, and all of the allies were on the final bridge, facing off against Adenvelt. So the way that they set it up for the allies to advance onto the bridge is that Calentier went on first, the West was in second position, Outlands was in third position, and then I don't recall what the other allies were past that point. Not relevant to this story. So, when they called, now the thing about the rules were that if you managed to force your way through the end of the opposing bridge, you could go over and attack the rear of the other bridge. That's important here. You don't necessarily need to kill everyone on your bridge. If you can force them off the end or force a gap and get anybody through, they can go over and then attack the other bridge. Okay? So that's important here when we're talking strategy. So, they call the lay on. Adenvelt and Calentier march out onto the bridge, get to the middle, and stop in Pike range. Now, mind you, on this bridge, we were not given an order to hold. Our objective was not to hold this bridge and prevent Adenvelt from busting through. All right? We were simply allowed to attack, and if we could force our way through to attack the back of the other bridge, we were allowed to do that. So we were not given a hold position order. That was not our objective. So Calentier and Adenvelt march out to the middle of the bridge to Pike range, stop, and start pike dueling. Now, Calentier is very proud of its shield wall. And I absolutely will give them credit. They have a fantastic shield wall. Okay? Not taking anything away from them at all. But in this particular instance, they threw it away. Literally threw it away. They stood there and pipe dueled, and pipe dueled, and pipe dueled, and pipe dueled, and I could go on. No point in really giving you an example of just how long this pipe duel went on. It went on long enough that, quite honestly, quite a few of the Western forces, who were not allowed to advance onto the bridge, I may add, we tried. The King of Kalantir turned around and told us to hold our position at the end of the bridge. We were not allowed to move up and reinforce them. So, quite a few of us Westerners literally sat down on the ground. A few of us laid down on the ground. And we just waited. We had people watching. I mean, if it looked like Adenfeld was going to push, that we could have gotten up and gotten ready really quick. I mean, not all of us did, but some of us did. And over time, through attrition, Kalantir was losing guys more than Adenfeld was losing guys. And as they lost guys, they lost terrain on the bridge. They were having to pull back and pull back and pull back. So when they got to within about 15 feet or so of the end of the bridge, our commanders start going around and kicking some of us in the boot soles to get up off the ground. And we got into formation. And when Kalantir was almost completely gone and only had about 10 feet left of our side of the bridge, Sihanouk looked at us all and he said, "Guys, we've only got 10 feet left of this bridge. I want to be on the other side." "Yes, Your Highness." The West moved up through Kalantir. Now, no, we didn't attack them, we didn't hit them, but we shoved through what was left of Kalantir, pushing through the shield wall, reforming on the other side, on the move, and kept going. No, we did not charge. The West seems to have gotten this cowboy reputation throughout the entire SCA known world for being a bunch of charging cowboys, and that is one of the most inaccurate statements out there. No, we are not. We simply employ the tactics that work for the objectives we are given. And in this case, we needed to be in full engagement. We were not here to hold this bridge. We were here to take this bridge and to push through the other end if we could. So, Griffin's Guard was on the right, Vinhold was on the left, the rest of the West was formed up behind us with orders to move up and plug holes as we advanced, and we advanced. And we got up to full engagement. Now here's the thing, I know this again is going to piss some people off. As we were moving up to engage, the King of Kalantir was yelling at us to fall back. We only had 10 feet left of our end of the bridge, and the King of Kalantir is yelling at us to fall back as we're advancing. Until finally Sihanouk turned around and told him, quite literally, point blank, very loudly, to shut up. And we moved forward, and we got to engagement range. We did not charge. We simply moved up until our shields were pressed against their shields and began attacking. Now, I was armed with a shield and a short sword. Yes, I know I made a big deal out of hand axes. I didn't have one this day. I had a short sword with a nice thrusting tip on it. And I kept my shield high, my head down. I kept my sword low and employed the Roman tactic of just constantly punching forward with my thrusting tip. Half the time I couldn't see what I was doing. That wasn't the point. I kept pushing, I kept attacking. Now, even though I couldn't always see exactly what was in front of me as I was thrusting forward, my great weapon people are right behind me, and they are doing a combination of thrust, hammer, and hook to loosen up the shield wall in front of us. So every time there was a gap in front of me, I was able to thrust through that gap and hit something. And I did quite often. I didn't keep body count. I just know that I constantly hit something as I was advancing, and people folded down in front of me, and I kept going. Within 5 minutes, the West had moved from 10 feet from our end of the bridge to within 5 feet of the far side of the bridge, And if there had been enough of us left, we would have blasted right through the Aidenveld line at that point on the corner and been able to move on and attack. I haven't hit the kicker to all of this yet. So the west makes it to within 5 feet of the other end of the bridge. At this point, the only people that are left are me and Drew Fortescue from Griffin's Guard. He is legged, down on his knees, up against the hay bales to his right. I am legged, on my knees, immediately to his left, with the two of us buttoned up, and we've got a good half a dozen or so pikes pounding it away at us. Notice I said pikes. There were no shieldmen up near us. They were back, allowing the pikes to blast at us. I look over to my left quickly. Nobody. All of the west is dead except for us two. None of the Aidenvelders had moved up to form around us at all. And I look back quickly the other direction, and Outlands is standing at the end of the bridge. They did not fill in behind the west as we advanced. If they had done so with the other allies behind them, they could have blown right through, right past us, and hit the backside of the bridge with Aidenveld down there. But they didn't. I'm quite literally yelling at the top of my lungs, "Get your asses up here!" And I'm using that language. I was pissed that they had not followed us as we went down. And then just at that moment, as I'm yelling and swearing at them, one of the opposing pikemen hits the side of my shield, tables it this way. I get stuffed in the ribs. As I go over, I yell out to Drew, "I'm down!" And he gets nailed at the same exact moment. At which point, Aidenveld and Outlands march out to the middle of the bridge, stop within pike range, and start pike dueling. Yeah. Now remember, the objective had never been hold the bridge. So why the pike dueling? This unfortunately is a fairly common occurrence. It's one of the reasons that I often refuse to fight in bridge battles at Pennsic, because the dominant tactic used is pike dueling. And at quite a few of the musters here in Ethelmark, where I live now, they practice pike dueling formations. And I'm not trying to be overly critical of my new kingdom. Absolutely not. I am as proud as hell of Ethelmark. I'm talking about a specific tactic that I strongly disagree with. And while, yes, you should practice it, there are a lot of other tactics you should be practicing equally as much. And I don't believe pike dueling should be given such a priority. It is actually a very poor tactic. It is useful only in specific situations, such as hold this position. So, there is a story from the good old days, along with some education, and yeah, I already know that I'm going to get a significant amount of criticism, but every one of the members of the barony of Vindhold who were at that war can vouch for what I have just said. Every member of Griffin's Guard who was there at the time can vouch for what I said, and every member of the Western Army who was there can vouch for what I said. So simply denying that that happened is not going to work. So, there's a story from the good old days. Yeah, sure, you betcha.